Hi all, I thought we could have another wonderful aesthetic experience looking at the sacrifices of Judit Polgar. Judit Polgar is a Hungarian chess grandmaster. She is by far the strongest female chess player in history. These notes are from Wiki. In 1991, she achieved the title of grandmaster at the age of just 15 years and 4 months. At the time, the youngest to have done so, breaking the record previously held by former world champion Bobby Fischer. She is the only woman to qualify for a world championship tournament, having done so in 2005. She is the first to date only woman to have surpassed the 2700 ELO rating barrier, reaching a career peak of 2735 and peak world ranking of rank 8, both achieved in 2005. She has been the #1 rated woman in the world since 1989. When she was just 12 years old. She has won or shared first in chess tournaments of Hastings 1993, Madrid 1994, Lyon 1996, US Open 1998, Hugevans 1999, Siegmund 1999, Japfa 2000 and a Najdorf Memorial of 2000. She is the only woman player to have won a game from the reigning world #1 player, and has defeated 10 current or former world champions in either rapid or classical chess, which include Magnus Carlsen, Anatoly Karpov, Garry Kasparov, Boris Spassky, Vasily Smyslov, Veselin Topalov, Vishy Anand, Rustam Ponomarev, Alexander Kalifman, and Rustam Kazandanov. On August 13th, 2014, which is the year of this video, she announced her retirement from competitive chess. So I thought it was fitting to have a look at some of her key sacrifices from both classical and rapid chess. This first example against Magnus Carlsen, Magnus has just snatched a pawn on a5. It looks like a bad King's Indian so far. White seems to have a big grip on f5, ruling out f5. It seems. How can black generate counterplay? Well, Judit has to create counterplay, and we'll put on a kibitzer for this, for these sacrifices, just to validate the analysis. She breaks free her position with this move f5 here, even though it can be captured by either pawn here. Magnus took with the g pawn, so he wanted to keep this bishop locked down. But now queen takes h5, and there's a threat at least of queen takes d1. So black has got a freer game. So how can Judit use her extra piece activity here? Well, she hits now the e4 pawn. So a threat. Magnus blocks this threat with knight d5, and now rook a8, another forcing move. The queen goes to b4, which might not be the ideal square, and we're about to see why. Rook fd8 is played. Still, white in theory has a clear advantage, but it's a rapid game, and Magnus is trying to cut down black's counterplay and now plays f3. And actually this has a little weakness of the last move here. This diagonal is weakened. Judit plays now a forcing move, queen h4, looking at the rook, but there's also something very naughty about this after rook c1. Bishop takes d5 now, another forcing move. C takes d5, and now can you see what Judit plays in this position, which actually puts black in the driving seat. If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, what would you play here with black? Okay, knight takes d5 using that pin. So who would have thought that queen was so vulnerable there, but knocking out the d5 knight, this tactic is now available. Magnus played now bishop takes g5 in response. And here, okay, it's a bit of a tricky move. Let's see, if hg, then queen takes b7, and this isn't so clear, this position. If the knight, where there's the knight move, say here, we can take it there. So this position wouldn't be so clear. If knight e3, then here bishop a6, and Magnus is getting some needed counterplay against black's king. So Judit is not having any of that. After bishop takes g5, she actually takes with the queen. Okay, so we have rook takes g5, knight takes b4. Black has activated the position, and in fact the d5 break is the next one to liberate further black's position. Rook g2, d5. So black is fully in the driving seat now. E takes d5, knight f takes d5, and there's even potential now of liberating the bishop along this diagonal. Magnus tries to keep the bishop locked down with knight e4, but knight e3, hitting the rook, f6, just ignoring that. Okay, bishop f8, rook h2. Black's king is fairly safe here. Rook ac8, bishop c4. Now Judit takes that bishop after b takes. Now plays king g8. So the king is getting into greater safety here, potentially on f7. If that wasn't played, maybe this is annoying, knight g5 using that pin. So breaking that pin on that pawn. So rook b2, rook c7 now, c5, so the knight's attacked, knight d3, forking the rooks, rook d2, pinning the knight. Very tactical game indeed. Rook cd7 unpinning, threatening the rook, c6, another little tactic. So okay, forcing move, b takes is played, rook takes, king f7. Now black has numerous possibilities. These checks are very dangerous against white's king. Rook b6 to stop the checks, knight c5 hitting the rook on d2 and the knight on e4. Rook takes d7, rook takes d7. So Judit is a piece up here. Knight f2, h5, and this is a dangerous h-pawn. I think white could actually resign this, but it's a rapid game, so I think this plays on. Rook on the 7th now, knight e6, and actually this knight hasn't got too many squares. It's about to be exterminated. It hasn't got a g5 square either now. It's been taken away for extermination. a4, rook h2, and here Magnus resigns. If he moves his knight to g1, then rook h1 to win the knight. So I thought this example against the current world champion was interesting to start the ball rolling on looking at her sacrifices. Rapid chess is a fun form of chess, and it shows actually, yeah, you can take greater risks in rapid chess, and seemingly very, very passive lockdown position here is liberated fully. You know, the f5 and d5 breaks are things in theory, and they seem to be like locked down initially, but with some forcing move magic going on here, black's position really fully activates after bishop takes d5, knight takes. So Judit, and actually being material up now, winning a piece at this stage with the three minor pieces against the two minor pieces. But there were some issues to deal with after that, and it was downhill there for Magnus after this. So often bishop c4, you know, knight g5 looks dangerous, but extinguishing the attack, getting the king a bit safer, and then in the final phase, this h-pawn is very, very dangerous. Knight e6 closes the net on the poor knight here. Okay, let's go on to another example of dynamic sacrificial play. This next game against another world champion before Magnus Carlsen, I thought would be pretty logical to look at. I had some thoughts that this is a theoretical opening actually in the Sicilian, this start position here, and it's a sharp sacrifice implied by white's play so far that after g6 by black, Judit doesn't move the knight. In fact, this is a theoretical idea now to play g5, so a full knight sacrifice from the opening, but it gives an idea of the kind of aggressive dynamic play of Judit Polgar. So Vichy Anand at the time of this game was 2781. Let's see what happens from this position. Vichy Anand took the knight after e takes f5. It's a very, very sharp position. Usually players play d5 here, queen f3. This is quite a beaten track actually. So it's a dynamic piece sacrifice, white castle's queenside. Knight bd7, bishop d2, offering another piece. So d takes, bishop takes. So at the moment, Judit Polgar is 2 pieces down. She only has the 2 bishops. That's right. Vichy's got 2 extra knights here, but he gives back one of them with bishop g7. We're kind of nearly out of book now. Very theoretical line. If the knight had retreated, let's see the damage from this position that could have been done. F6, it really just hems in all of black's pieces, and white is thinking of bishop c4 next maybe, and maybe taking here or things like this. It looks dangerous. So giving back a piece, one of the knights, seems like a good idea, and in theory black, from an engine point of view, might be okay here at certain depths anyway. After castling though, it's almost like equal nearly, as though white's got enough compensation. G takes, queen takes. It looks like a dangerous position. It's still a piece down, but let's see now what happens. Queen e3 from Judit, and I think there's an immediate threat now of rook takes d7, followed by bishop takes e5 because of that pin. The power of the pin piece is illusionary. Bishop takes e5 would be threatened. For example, just to show you that, if b5 rook takes, then bishop takes, and you see that's crushing that pin piece. So that has to be dealt with after queen e3. Pressure on e5 here being exerted. We see king h8 unpinning. f4 now, trying to intensify the pressure there. Queen b6, queen g3 threatening mate on g7, queen h6, and now trying to distract the queen. Rook d6, f6 hems in the bishop. Bishop d2 now threatening f takes e, e4 stopping that. But white is doing fine here. Bishop c4, very, very dangerous position. These pieces haven't got out yet. b5, black's trying to develop them. Bishop e6, rook a7, awkward looking defense. Rook c6 now threatening, well, maybe calm things, as well as rook c8 on the cards if the rook move. But bishop e3 first, try and chase that away to try and loosen black's pieces. Okay, so a5, bishop e3, so the rook has to remain in contact for that d7, otherwise rook takes c8 here, bishop d7. So the rook plays to b7 here. Now we see bishop d5, very strong move, threatening rook takes c8 now. So the rook, should it get out of the way? Yes, rook b8. But now rook c7, white is making progress here, because now there's actually a threat of bishop a7 winning that rook. Notice how Judit has tied down black on the king side and is winning now, trying to win material on the queen side, and this rook on the 7th is very, very dangerous. Black's pieces are very, very hemmed in, very uncomfortable position for Vichy Anand. b4, b3, rook b5, and now bishop c6 is played. So where can the rook move to? Well, black is losing material now. Plays rook takes f5. And simple actually would be bishop takes d7. That is simple and strong. Judit played another strong move, rook takes, which is also very strong after this, forking both rooks. Rook c5. So white has regained her piece, but with big advantage in this position. After rook d1, the advantage is very, very clear actually. That check is pretty lethal in this position. King g8, and now crushing move, queen g2. So the queen just hitting e4. It's very, very difficult for black to do anything here. So this check and queen e4 will be the end of game for black. Black resigned here. If Vichy had played queen g6, queen takes e4 with numerous threats like queen e6 or queen c4, and black's king safety has had it. For example, h6, there's rook g1 here. That wins material like that. That'll win a rook. Otherwise the rook is hanging. If rook g1, queen here, queen e6 check, and if say here, queen d7, this rook is just totally misplaced on f5 to handle this sort of thing. So yeah, after queen g2, Vichy had enough of this game. He didn't try queen g6. It just looks pretty hopeless. If we try something else, let's try moving the rook somewhere. Then here actually, rook d8 is very strong. f5, because we've got this bishop h6 idea as well. Check, check, and this is very, very horrible. Say here, queen c8, that pin piece is terrible. So black would be losing material, just overloaded. So a very, very sharp opening sequence here in the Sicilian, but you know, very interesting piece sacrifice with after g6 to play g5, and Judit has played this in other games as well with success. Okay, let's go on to another example. Now this isn't so much of a major dramatic piece sacrifice, but it's the opponent which makes this game special. I thought I'd show you a kind of positional sacrifice here. Garry Kasparov is playing black. It's Russia versus the rest of the world, played in Moscow 2002. Kasparov, playing black, plays h5, so he's got the bishop pair. And Judit now plays knight f5, and if this kind of, you could argue it's a kind of structural sacrifice in it potentially accepts double pawns, but I thought I needed to show you this game. It's Judit's win against Garry Kasparov. There was a bit of controversy in a serious long game where Kasparov had touched the piece and not moved it, but it resulted eventually in a win for Kasparov, but that was a controversial encounter. But here, I think this is a very interesting encounter with knight f5. I think this was a rapid time control. Kasparov on the back foot here. Does he want to double white's pawn? So it's kind of structural sacrifice. It's not accepted here. Kasparov retains the bishop pair for the moment. King f3, bishop g6. Can the knight be tolerated there on f5 for so long? Rook d2. Now hg, hg. Check. King g2. Rook h7. So Kasparov is passive here. You see these pieces are quite kind of passive. King g3, f6. Now we see bishop f4 as though c7 might be a target in some lines, as well as g7 tying down this rook more. It's here that Kasparov accepts the structural kind of sacrifice of the double pawns. But if they're not exploitable, then it's not really an exploitable weakness having these double pawns. So that's my little excuse for including this game fragment here. Good revision for those of you who've seen it before, and maybe you haven't seen this before. So f takes e5, rook e1. You see that white's rooks are much better at the moment than Kasparov's. Bishop d6, bishop takes e5, king d7. Now c4. This is a big advantage to white. What does Kasparov do here? If he tries to do something like b6, then white can carry on playing through with the c5 plan with b4. And if c5 here, then this could get nasty like this, similar to the game. In the game, Kasparov plays c5. Now white's extra rook activity means now that after bishop takes, c takes, this is a really exploitable weakness. After rook e6. So there's no rook h6 defense. You just take with this rook. So black is losing that backward pawn. We've seen recently actually, you know, Carlsen had a backward pawn nearly lost, but here, a backward pawn like this, it's very, very bad to have. Rook a h8. Rook e takes d6. Check. So winning a pawn. But these are double pawns. You might not think it's that major. But now the pressure is kept on. Looking at c5. Check. 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 King goes up. On here, rook e8 check. Just rook e6 will do, and potentially undoubling the pawn to make a major pawn out of that one. So b6 was played, but now check. Now here, if king b7 that wasn't played, then in this position rook g6 might be the strongest. Rook g6, looking at g7. So if a check here, then strong is actually rook e6 there. So this would be passive for black. And if rook there, then check, and we can win that g7 and have a fast f pawn. So Kasparov played actually to b8, and now we have rook d7 looking at g7 anyway. Rook h2. The king drops back. She protects the f2 pawn. Rook f8. Rook c7. The rooks are now doubled on the 7th rank. Rook takes f5. It's only a double pawn that Kasparov has munched there. Check. Check. and now taking on g7. So this is a strong pass pawn potentially, but rook g8 is threatened as well. So if Kasparov takes here, then, well, actually this is, the threat is not just this, it's this one that we mate. So Kasparov has to react to that. He plays king c8 and resigns, I think, with this move. The continuation might be, and he actually seemed to storm off. There's a video on YouTube. He didn't really stay for much post-mortem commentary here. If rook takes a7, this is not good with the two rooks on the 7th. Then rook here will protect the f2 pawn. So this is a very dangerous pass pawn here. If, for example, taking the king's restricted, and white can easily make progress now. First, safeguarding these pawns from that rook as preparation could be a good idea, for example. Or just bringing the king up, and just bringing the king here is going to be dangerous. And if the rook has to stop, then f4. It's a gradual win without much counterplay possible from black here. So a great win there. And my excuse is really, it's a kind of structural sacrifice, this knight f5. But yeah, to beat Kasparov, I think it needed to be in this video showing this win. A great win for Judit Polgar. So let's see another great example. This is another former world champion now. I'd like to show you against Vasily Smyslov playing white. Judit has got a nice pin here on this knight, and these bishops look quite menacing. She plays now bishop h4, and white plays g3, but here Judit doesn't have to react to this threat. Some damage is being done to white's king safety here. Judit plays e3, so threatening queen takes f2 mate. F takes is played, and now bishop g5, and there's no real defense to bishop takes e3 here. This is horrible. White resigned in this position. If e4, then we can play the bishop e3 check, and say taking, sorry, that's pinned, pardon me. Say king here. In this position, the most crushing move is actually to use this pin on e4. So knight f5. So coming in with things like this, potentially. If it takes here, knight takes g3, and then queen f2 is checkmate. Or if king h2, again queen f2 is checkmate. So that's really quite crushing. So this whole thing after bishop g5, this looks terrible here after bishop e3 check. If king g2, that's even easier. We just play queen f2 and a mate here. So what else does white do? How can white try and defend f4? If queen g4, trying to keep an eye, just bishop e3 again, queen f2, it's not really helping. So this is really crushing after bishop g5. The engine suggestion is to give up the queen with queen f4. Knight c4, just one moment for knight c4. In this position, queen e2, looking to mate here. If e4 now, bishop takes e4, and white has to give up a knight to stave off the mate, but it's totally lost. Knight f5 here, piece up. White's king still had it. So that was against Vasily Smyslov playing white in the match, women's versus veterans match played in Czech Republic of 1995. So this was the final position: g3, e3, bishop g5, the final move. Okay, let's carry on. This next example here, Judit Polgar is playing Ferenc Burks, a 2-5-7-8, and plays directly with knight eg5, looking at h7. Black now plays h6, and Judit now plays the check, king h8, and seems to be looking at winning the rook. Black now plays h takes g5, and maybe is hoping white would take the rook here. This wouldn't be particularly good actually to take the rook in this position. because of g4. And if the knight moves, then bishop g5. Ouch, it's really backfired on white, this skewer. So in this position, after hg, instead we see the move g4. Engines actually like black a tiny bit at a certain depth here, but it's a very difficult position now because black is faced with h4, and in fact the evaluation is coming down to equal now. Very difficult to parry this h4 threat. So the rook moves, and then we get this h4, very dangerous h-file attack. g6, h takes g, king g7. Now queen f4. So the threat now is the check here, followed by a check here, which is very, very dangerous. So bishop b7, and we have that now. Check, check. Now if king g7, that doesn't help because there's queen h6 check, so the king just goes to g8. But now rook h1, threatening that mate, queen h8, queen h7. Bishop takes g5, check is played. Now here, king b1 would be a mistake actually, because the bishop is actually holding the h6 square, and in fact king g7, the king can evacuate to f7 here, f6, pardon me, check, king f6, and this doesn't seem terminal for black's king safety. Instead, wisely, we see in this position knight takes g5 instead, luring the queen to g5, check. Now f4. So there's simultaneous threats on the queen and mating here. Black gives up the queen. Queen takes f4. Queen takes f4. After bishop takes e4, queen takes e4. Here black decided can't cope in this position. He resigned here. Threats are quite significant. For example, if king g7, then g5, and with queen c6 on the cards, the queen is overwhelming the rooks in this position. It's the exchange up as well, rook against knight. So this is an example. Let's follow through. Black will be under great pressure. d5 now, for example, like this. You can see white's building up the pressure and has numerous threats. So this position is already extremely dangerous. If you get a battery like this. And things like queen h6 now and rook h4. The queen and rook are quite menacing still on that h-file. So black didn't fancy any of that and resigned a bit earlier. Okay, in this position. So an interesting sequence of events there from the initial position to reel open that, peel open that h-file. Okay, let's have a look at another example. Now, someone who played very well in the recent Olympiad, Judit Polgar, was playing against Gavriel, who was 25-80 at the time, and bishop d5 was played here. And Judit now brings out the kings, a king hunt. Knight takes f7 was played. Knight takes f7, hitting the queen and rook. King takes, check, king e6. So using that power of that illusory pin piece, the power of the pin piece is illusionary. Now a very, very strong, accurate move in this position. Queen g4 check. Okay, it doesn't matter really where the king goes. It seems all very good for white. The king steps to f7. We have check. And now a funny thing here. Well, it looks very, very dangerous. If king g8, it almost looks as though white's mating on the diagonal, but no, it's got things covered here. But e6 is really dangerous. And say knight e5, and we can just take that. White's doing very well here. So Amzarov didn't want to put the king on g8. He keeps it around on e7, but still e6 is strong. So looking at the bishop now to take the bishop. Bishop takes e6 was played. Rook e1 pinning that bishop. Queen d6, and now bishop takes e6. After knight takes, powerful move. Knight e4 now. Unleashing bishop g5 now, coming in. Queen e5, bishop g5 check, and after king d7, now can you see this next move, which is very, very powerful. If I give you 5 seconds here, what would you play? Okay, Judit Polgar plays knight c5 check. So if queen takes c5, then queen takes e6 is checkmate. So bishop takes c5 is played. And now even the strongest move you might think would be just to take the queen, but no, even stronger. Queen f7 check is played. Okay, so this is even stronger because the e6 knight will be hanging soon after taking the queen. King d6, trying to keep hold of the e6 knight. But now, what does white play? Can you see what white played in this position? If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video here. Okay, bishop e7, this is a very, very strong move, stronger than rook takes e5. If rook takes e5, in fact black might be doing okay, it would ruin the whole thing. This might actually be okay for black. No, but bishop e7 check, and here it's very difficult. After king d5, black actually resigned here, probably spotting queen f3 as mate in 3. If check, b3, checkmate. Now, if knight takes e7, this is the other question. If that happened, then rook takes e5, and the knights are falling here. For example, check. We can take both of the knights off soon. Well, that's checkmate. Even more important, that's checkmate. Actually, we don't have to take the other knight off. One will do. So that's no good in that position. So here, yeah, the knights are in trouble anyway. So what does black do? c6, take this one, and actually take the bishop. Carnage. Say something like this: c takes d4, c6 ties down the knight here. So white is actually material up finally after all the investments made earlier in this game. So spectacular king hunt here after bishop d5, knight takes f7, just bringing the king out. Some very, very delicate check moves though here, with the queen check here. If king takes e5 had been played, then check here is strong. For example, like this, queen f4, checkmate, shows the cooperation of the two pieces here against the king. And if here, check. So it's a perfectly sound king hunt really. In all lines, very good. Knight takes f7. It's actually sound, believe it or not. Let's go on to another great example. Sound from an engine perspective. Judit Polgar against Pavlina Angelova in Thessalonica, Greece, 1988. This is quite a curious example. Black just played bishop takes e5, and it looks as though black is threatening to take and then take here. Judit kind of plays a very surprising move here. I wonder if you can guess it if I give you 5 seconds to pause the video. So it's one thing to spot the opponent's threats, but what can you do? Parry them, play passively, or welcome them? Judit welcomes the threat with rook ae1, saying, do this, lose your dark square bishop. And this puts white technically in a great position. Black took, takes, and now there are very serious threats that white is going to play, like queen h6, threatening to take here, check, and back row mate black. Queen takes b5 is played, so queen h6, so that's on the cards now. And it's missed. It's totally missed. After queen f5, queen takes f8, mating. Yeah, queen f8 ended the game. Totally missed that threat. Now if we look technically at this position after queen h6, there's nothing actually black can do apart from give up her queen, so we'd actually have to rewind this back even further here. This is a bad position. Once black takes there, it's pretty grim. After queen takes b5, it's gone there. If black had stepped back, that's probably the safest. But bishop c4, white's got a big advantage. Knight d5 looks strong here. Well, by knight f6 anyway. Very, very dangerous. So what could black do? It's this lack of development that's been totally exploited here. Giving white a phenomenal position after this. Queen h6. You might think f6. Let's have a go with f6. Just bishop f6. Threatening to mate. That's pretty desperate here. Black has to. Black's going to get mated. Queen f1 delays it. Computer suggestion. But this is still mating black. Okay, so welcoming the threats of bishop c3 and queen b5. The dark squares are the key thing in these sort of positions. Let's have a look at another example now. Very aggressive looking position with Judit Polgar playing black against Alexei Shirov, another fierce, dynamic, aggressive player. So they're of the same kind of stylistic ilk. So queen f3, and we see now a very sharp move, g5, trying to get this e5 square. F takes g5, so Judit gets that nice looking knight. Now queen f6 is not a problem actually here, looking at the rook, because actually knight takes g4. It's forking queen and bishop with great compensation here. So the queen g2 was played, and the queen is on that diagonal. And Judit now, yeah, the power of the pin piece is illusionary. It seems to come to mind in a lot of Judit Polgar position scenarios. It seems she really loves the pins and exploiting them, and that illusionary effect. b4, knight e2, and now, fantastic move. I wonder if you can guess it. And actually the engine likes it as well. If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, what would you play here with black, starting from now? Okay, h5. So trying to take control of f5 here to use that for a piece. If g takes, that's a legal move en passant, of course. That's fine. Knight 7 to g6 with knight h4 coming in is really dangerous. This is horrible for white, potentially. So g takes h5 is played, and now we get the use of that pinned pawn with knight f5, and things get really spectacular here. There is a dedicated video to this game on the channel if you want to check it out. Now can you see what Judit played? If I give you 5 seconds starting from now. Okay, queen takes g5. Wow. What's going on here? If queen takes g5, this wasn't played, then check. Knight takes g5 leaves black a lot better actually here. White's centre has crumbled. Black's piece activity is massive. All these pawns are dropping off quite rapidly here. For example, like this, knight e4. And then another pawn will drop off. After rook takes h5, then another pawn is targeted. The piece pressure is phenomenal. So that's avoided. Knight a5 was played. Now another great move, spectacular sequence of events here. Knight e3. Now on queen g5, actually knight f3 is checkmate. The two knights mate the king here. So knight e3. So we see queen g3 being played. Now the queen is just taken off. Black is better here because knight takes c2, winning the rook. Yeah, just take the rook. There's a small matter of the knight coming out here. That's handled with b3. After takes, knight takes b3, so just nicks the exchange there. Exchange. black is better. Knight c5, black's the exchange up, and the game continued a little while longer. Knight d4 check, bishop d6, the exchange up, doesn't matter about losing a pawn temporarily. That's avoided. Bishop g2, bishop e5, strong central control, strong dark square control. This knight hasn't got too many useful squares, the rook's going to be good soon. Connecting the rooks, so this sort of thing is really dangerous if king c5. Rook a1, knight c6, and here Shirov resigns. It looks pretty bad, the exchange down in this position. Black, it's just a technique win really from this position. Nothing really going on. Let's try and give an example. Bishop h1, say. Black could play a5. Say the bishop keeps on going like that. This, building up the position. Let's just see what black could do. Just take here at some point. And then this is really dangerous for a4. And then rook b3 check. So Shirov resigned here, without carrying on. No need to at this level. What a fantastic sequence though, from earlier on. Okay. Now another world champion example. Anatoly Karpov, Judit Polgar playing white here, and has just played d5. Anatoly puts the knight on a5. It looks as though Judit has potentially a vulnerable pawn here. Plays knight e5. If queen takes d5, then Judit just wins Karpov's queen with takes, check, winning the queen. So bishop f6 was played. The bishop supports and seemingly losing a3. Is there enough compensation here? Well, at the moment, the queen is tied down to the bishop on d7. Pardon me. So bishop takes e5 is played first, and then snatching this pawn. So can Judit show compensation here? Well, actually, in this position, you'll notice that both the bishops stare at Anatoly's king. We see rook e3, and there's a very serious danger now lurking around these two pawns. After queen c5, can you see what Judit played in this position, which tears black's king safety to pieces? If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, starting from now. Okay, bishop takes h7, yes. King takes, check, and here Karpov resigned. We're going to have, after king g8, guess what? Another bishop sack would peel open black's king, threatening mate's here. This would be hopeless for black. If king here, then rook g3 is mating very quickly. For example, like this. And if f6, then bishop takes f6 as a mate in 5 apparently. So we're threatening like this, queen h8 and queen g7. If takes here, check, and this is all over really quite quickly. For example, like this, rook g7, checkmate there. All the variations are just losing for black here. After bishop takes g7, it's forced mate in 5 actually, according to engines. Now another Shirov encounter. So very interesting. Their encounters. Shirov had just played in this position with black king e7. Can you guess what Judit plays here? If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video and get used to this new position we're in. So white play here. Okay. Knight takes d6. Very, very dangerous. Queen takes d6 is played. Knight e4. Hitting the queen. Now, if the queen steps back, don't think this is particularly good. Because if bishop takes d7 actually, the king is a bit overloaded. And here if takes, then we take here, and this is going to be brilliant for white. White's got a massive position here, for example like this. to be avoided. So Shirov in this position actually dared to take Judit's centre pawn. We have check. And now, a point to note, let's have a look at f6. Why not try and gain in tempo? Well, the thing is, rook d1, looking at d7 is pretty nasty. So that wasn't played. Knight df6. And we still have rook d1. Pin piece is illusionary. You can just take the queen here. That knight's not doing anything to recapture. So the queen steps back. And we've got this, still that pin piece. So actually d7, it's illusionary, the power of the pin piece. Rook d7, winning the queen like that. Takes won the queen. Still with huge pressure on f6. After h6, now classy move here to finish off. Very elegant. I wonder if you can spot it if I give you 5 seconds to pause the video. White's winning now anyway, but this was a nice elegant move played here. Okay, queen d1, threat, queen d6, mating, queen and bishop. Black resigned. If takes, let's check this out. Check, check. This is actually had it. The black king's had it here. Say like this, knight d6. This is all pretty much forced. So a nice way of finishing off the game, implied by queen d1 there at the end. This nice little retreat, queen d1. Wonderful stuff. One more sacrificial example. Judit Polgar is playing Peter Vidler. Peter Vidler plays queen d7. Oh dear, you shouldn't have any pin pieces against Judit Polgar. I think that's the thing that's been made crystal clear here. He's accepting a pin piece. Does he think he knows better tactically in this position than Judit? Rook d8. Seems things are safe at the moment, because if we try and exploit this, say we play bishop c5, then that would backfire here. Peter Vidler could play bishop g4. So he's got a point now. The pin isn't that dangerous in this particular position. Say rook takes here. This is better for black. The exchange up. No, not bishop c5. Instead, bishop e4 puts the pressure on black. Okay, here bishop takes a2 was played, and now another little thing, not bishop takes c6, because then queen e6 unpinning, and actually black can carry on with bishop c7 to safely unpin further against that rook on d8. No, that wasn't the idea. Bishop b6 now. And if the rook moves, say the rook moves here, then bishop c5 is crushing. There's nothing there. Because if bishop d5, this is check. There's no time, and black will be losing that bishop on d6. So, bishop b3 counter-attacking white's rook. But now we see a very nifty and powerful move. The engine really likes this move. Really, really a strong move in this position. Can you see, if I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, what does white play here? Okay, rook d4 keeps the pin up, and in the most accurate way. Let's have a quick look at rook d2. Black has here rook e8. And it's not such a big deal here. If bishop c5, queen e6, you see, counter-attacking on e4. So rook d4 was safeguarding the bishop here. So we're keeping up this dangerous pin on d6 without any potential sneaking out of the pin stuff to do with the e4 bishop. When you're pinned by Judit Polgar, expect to be punished without any excuses of counter-attacking her pieces. Rook d4. So black is in a very difficult spot now. He plays c5, and we finally see this pressure on d6 now on the board. Queen e6. And in this position, what is black up to? It looks as though he has unpinned. What is this? Naughtiness. That's just happened. Well, hold on a sec. In this position, the queen is unfortunately on a skewer line. Can you see what Judit now transforms this position with that new skewer possibility? What does she play here if I give you 5 seconds? So that's the clue. Skewering queen and king. What would you play? 5 seconds starting from now. Okay. c4, another fantastic perk of the rook on d4. To be able to sacrifice itself on c4 if needed. So bishop d5 is now threatened. There's a pin on d8. If bishop takes c4, then we can play this, for example, with bishop d5 to follow. That's very good. And you might wonder, well, hold on a sec. What if black had played queen e7? Then still the check is actually accentuating the pin on d6 here. If king moves, we just take on d6 now, because we're taking on b3 now. With the rook supported by the pawn on c3, that's neat. And if the bishop took, then we come with check, putting more pressure on that pin. So we're going to take this. There's no major checks or anything for black. So yeah, out tactic there after rook d4, c5, this position. Black resigned here. Peter Vidler resigned. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that little selection of sacrifices from Judit Polgar. So don't give her any piece activity or pin pieces, but I'm hoping she will return to the scene maybe one day for competitive chess, or just for some rapid tournaments or blitz tournaments, which are often more fun, in my opinion, than non-classical games. And she's excelled at that, clearly, even beating Magnus Carlsen on rapid chess, as one of her examples showed. So a fantastic career from the strongest player that chess has seen so far in chess history. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.